Frederick was born in Berlin on the 24th of January, 1712. In 1713, Frederick William I became King of Prussia, thus making the young Frederick the crown prince. The new king wished for his son and daughters to be educated not as royalty, but as simple folk. As Frederick grew, his preference in music, literature, and French culture clashed with his father's militarianism, resulting in Frederick William frequently beating and humiliating him. Frederick found an ally in his sister, Wilhelmine, with whom he remained close for her life. At age 16, he became close friends with Hans Hermann von Katt. When he was 18, Frederick plotted to flee to England with Katt and other junior army officers. When the conspirators were preparing to escape on the 5th of August, 1730, Frederick and Katt were arrested and imprisoned in Kustrin. Because they were army officers who had tried to flee Prussia for Great Britain, an accusation of treason was thrown against the pair. The king briefly threatened the crown prince with the death penalty, then considered forcing Frederick to renounce the succession in favor of his brother, Augustus Wilhelm. The king forced Frederick to watch the decapitation of his friend Hans Hermann von Katt at Kustrin on the 6th of November, leaving the crown prince to faint right before the fatal blow was struck. Frederick was granted a royal pardon and released from his cell on the 18th of November, although he remained stripped of his military rank. Instead of returning to Berlin, however, he was forced to remain in Kustrin. Tension eased slightly when Frederick William I visited Kustrin a year later, and Frederick was allowed to visit Berlin on the occasion of his sister Wilhelmine's wedding on the 20th of November, 1731. Frederick himself proposed marrying Maria Theresa of Austria in return for renouncing the succession. Instead, the crown prince married Elizabeth Christine of Brunswick-Bevern, although Frederick wrote to his sister that there can be neither love nor friendship between us. He went along with the wedding on the 12th of June in 1733. He had little in common with his bride and resented the political marriage. Frederick was restored to the Prussian army as colonel of the regiment von der Grund when Prussia provided a contingent of troops to aid Austria during the War of Polish Succession. Frederick studied under Prince Eugene of Savoy during the campaign against France in the Rhine. Prince Frederick was 28 years of age when his father Frederick William I died, and he ascended the throne of Prussia in 1740. When Frederick ascended the throne, Prussia consisted of scattered territories including Cleves, Mark, and Regensburg in the west of the Holy Roman Empire, Brandenburg, Hither Pomerania, and further Pomerania in the east of the empire, as well as the former Duchy of Prussia outside the empire bordering the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Frederick's goal was to modernize and unite his disconnected lands. Frederick established Prussia as the fifth and smallest European power by using the resources his frugal father had cultivated. Desiring the prosperous Austrian province of Silesia, which Prussia had a minor claim to, and so the War of Austrian Succession began on the 16th of December 1740 when Frederick invaded and quickly occupied the province. Frederick was worried that if he did not move to occupy Silesia, Augustus III, King of Poland and Elector of Saxony, would seek to connect his own disconnected lands through Silesia. Therefore, the Prussian king struck preemptively and quickly occupied Silesia, using as justification an obscure treaty from 1537. Frederick occupied Silesia in just 7 weeks. The first real battle Frederick faced in Silesia was the Battle of Mollwitz on the 10th of April 1741. Though Frederick had actually served under Prince Eugene in Savoy, this was the first time he would command an army. Believing that his army had been defeated by the Austrians, Frederick sought to avoid capture and galloped away, leaving Field Marshal Kurt Schwerin in command of the army. In actuality, the Prussians had won the battle at the very moment that Frederick had fled. Frederick would later admit to humiliation at this breach of discipline and would later state, "Mollwitz was my school." Dramatically winning the Battle of Chotositz, Frederick forced the Austrians to seek peace with him in the First Silesian War. Prussian possessions in Silesia gave the kingdom control over the Oder River. In 1744, Frederick also gained the minor territory of East Frisia after its last ruler died. Frederick made another alliance with the French and preemptively invaded Bohemia in August of 1744. By late August 1744, all of Frederick's columns had crossed the Bohemian frontier. Frederick marched straight for Prague and laid siege to the city. Thus the Second Silesian War began. Frederick's artillery arrived in Prague on the 8th of September 1744. On the 11th of September 1744, the Prussians began a 3-day artillery bombardment of Prague in which Prague fell a few days later. 3 days after the fall of Prague, Frederick's troops were again on the march in the heart of central Bohemia. On the 4th of June 1745, Frederick trapped a joint force of Saxons and Austrians that had crossed the mountains to invade Silesia. Once again, Frederick's stunning victory on the battlefield caused his enemies to seek peace terms. Under the terms of the Treaty of Dresden, signed on the 25th of December 1745, Austria was forced to adhere to the terms of the Treaty of Breslau, giving Silesia to Prussia. Habsburg Austria and Bourbon France, traditionally enemies, allied together in the diplomatic revolution of 1756 following the collapse of the Anglo-Austrian alliance. Frederick swiftly made an alliance with Great Britain at the Convention of Westminster. On the 29th of August in 1756, his well-prepared army crossed the frontier and preemptively invaded Saxony, thus beginning the 7 Years' War. While the Prussian invasion of Saxony was successful, it took long to complete. The sudden death of Empress Elizabeth of Russia in January 1762 led to the succession of her Germanized nephew Peter III. This led to the collapse of the anti-Prussian coalition. Peter immediately withdrew his armies from Frederick's territories. Peter III not only offered Frederick the full use of the Russian corps for the remainder of the war, more significantly, Russia's change from an enemy of Prussia to its patron rattled the leadership of Sweden, who hastily made peace with Frederick as well. With the threat of his eastern borders over and France occupied in its struggle with Britain, Frederick was able to fight the Austrians to a stalemate and finally brought them to the peace table. While the ensuing Treaty of Hubertusburg simply returned the European borders to what they were before the 7 Years' War, Frederick's ability to retain Silesia during the Silesian Wars made him and Prussia popular throughout the German-speaking territories. Frederick's ultimate success in the 7 Years' War came at a heavy price. Prussia's population was devastated from various invasions by Austria, Russia, and Sweden. Many of Frederick's closest friends, including his sister and the best of his officers' corps, died during this war. Late in his life, Frederick also involved Prussia in the low-scale war of the Bavarian Succession in 1778, in which he stifled Austrian attempts to exchange the Austrian Netherlands for Bavaria. For their part, the Austrians tried to pressure the French to participate in the War of Bavarian Succession, since there were guarantees under consideration related to the Peace of Westphalia. Unfortunately for Emperor Joseph II, the French were unable to provide sufficient manpower and resources to the endeavor, since they were already struggling on the North American continent against the British, aiding the American cause of independence in the process. Frederick undertook the conquest of Polish territory under the pretext of an enlightening and civilizing mission, particularly given his negative perceptions about Poland and the traditions of its ruling elite. He prepared the ground for the partition of Poland-Lithuania in 1752 at the latest, hoping to gain a territorial bridge between Pomerania, Brandenburg, and East Prussian provinces. Frederick became concerned, however, after Russia gained significant influence over Poland in the Repentism of 1767, a position which also threatened Austria and the Ottoman Turks. In the ensuing Russo-Turkish War, Frederick supported Catherine with a subsidiary of 300,000 rubles with reluctance, as he did not want Russia to become even stronger through the acquisitions of Ottoman territory. After Russia had occupied the Danubian principalities in 1769 to 1717, Frederick's representatives in St. Petersburg, his brother Prince Henry, convinced Frederick and Maria Theresa that the balance of power would be maintained by a division of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, instead of Russia taking land from the Ottomans. They agreed to the first partition of Poland in 1772, which took place without a war. Frederick claimed most of the Polish province of Royal Prussia. Prussia annexed 200,000 square miles and 600,000 inhabitants. However, Prussia's Polish territory was also the best developed economically. The newly created province of West Prussia connected East Prussia and farther Pomerania, and granted Prussia control over the mouth of the Vistula River. Frederick settled 300,000 colonists on territories he had conquered and enforced Germanization. Frederick died in an armchair in his study in the Palace of Sanssouci, 17th of August, 1786, at the age of 74. He left instructions that he should be buried next to his greyhounds in the garden. His nephew and successor, Frederick William II, instead ordered the body to be entombed next to his father in the Potsdam Garrison Church. Near the end of World War II, Hitler ordered Frederick's coffin, along with those of his father Frederick William I, World War I Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg, and Hindenburg's wife Gutrid, to be hidden in a salt mine as protection from destruction. The United States Army relocated the remains to Marburg in 1946. In 1953, the coffins of Frederick and his father were moved to Berg Hohenzollern. On the 205th anniversary of his death on August 17, 1991, Frederick's casket was displayed, covered by a Prussian flag, and escorted by the Bundesheer Guard of Honor. After nightfall, Frederick's body was finally laid to rest in the terrace of the vineyard of Sanssouci, in the still existing crypt he had built there in accordance to his last will.